The dawn after tariffs felt nothing like morning. Brief backstory: in January 25, Donald Trump returned to the White House, and by April he had signed his fateful decree, slapping tariffs on the entire world. Everything spiraled downward from there. Allies lost trust in the United States, supply chains snapped, and Canada and Mexico shut their borders in an unprecedented show of solidarity with Beijing, which had now become the bastion of free trade. After Washington cut off aid to Ukraine, Russia broke through the front and, within months, rolled its tanks across all of Europe, bringing the continent completely under its control. The new axis of global influence, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, sent carrier groups into every ocean corridor, choking off America's lifelines. Hyperinflation crushed wages, grocery aisles turned to bare skeletons, and the orange glow of burning oil refineries stained the American night. Nathan Bishop remembered numbers better than birthdays. Once a quantitative prodigy for a boutique arm of PayPal's investment division, he had modeled volatility for fun and predicted recessions like other people predicted summer rain. Then the storm that no model had dared to print swallowed his career whole. His savings atomized in the 3-day run on digital banks, his Tesla Model 3 sat in a silent parking stack, batteries drained and incapable of finding a single lithium cell in a market that now priced them like diamonds. On the night everything broke irrevocably, Manhattan felt like a colossal wine glass vibrating one screech above the note that shatters crystal. Luxury boutiques that once piped bottled air into silent lobbies had become barter bazaars. A single Hermes scarf could trade for 2 gallons of synthetic fuel. A slightly scuffed Louis Vuitton holdall might secure a month's worth of antibiotics. Streets echoed with the low growl of salvaged Mercedes diesels and kidney-shaking BMW coupes retrofitted to burn cooking oil. Neon signs flickered but no longer advertised, each was just another dim torch against the blackout. Nathan's apartment in Hell's Kitchen overlooked 9th Avenue, once a river of yellow cabs. Now the avenue flickered with kerosene torches and the occasional muzzle flash of a price riot. That evening he sat at a chipped glass desk, nursing a rationed ounce of Hennessy, last birthday's gift from a client who had paid him in engraved bottles instead of the cratering stock options, and tried to decide whether to burn the remaining furniture for heat. Data feeds were gone, but a shadow internet of ham radios and cracked satellites still pulsed beneath the static. He monitored packet drift the way anglers watched river eddies, waiting for the glint of a miracle. It arrived at midnight as a mathematically impossible heartbeat, a fragment of code dubbed Index Omega. 2 kilobytes of dense rust signed with a quantum-resistant hash and timestamped in Shenzhen 48 hours earlier. But its structure felt impossibly elegant, like reading the first lines of an alien poem that nevertheless rhymed with everything he had ever believed about markets. Where conventional crypto ledgers recorded value in chains of blocks, Index Omega described a lattice of fluid trust packets constantly renegotiated by participants. It behaved almost like an immune system, seeking equilibrium through ceaseless microtransactions. In a world where dollars could lose half their worth between sunrise and sunset, this code whispered a different law: value is velocity. He leaned back, glass catching amber light, mind hammering through permutations. In theory, Index Omega could weave a back-alley economy strong enough to outrun the Bureau of Economic Defense's inflation metrics. In practice, it would paint a target on the back of anyone who touched it. The Treasury's newborn Anti-Subversion Bureau froze accounts, confiscated hardware wallets, and broadcast midnight trials on Patriot Vision. Nathan had already watched 2 former colleagues marched across glossy floors in zip ties, accused of monetary terrorism for swapping gold Krugerrands under a bridge in Jersey. Yet the code sang a siren song of possibility, not just survival, redemption. If he could build a proof of concept and distribute it before the Bureau sniffed the relay, Index Omega might spark a decentralized lifeboat big enough for millions. He would not need factories or freighters, only math and courage. Somewhere beyond the blocked borders, families scraped by on contraband soy and powdered eggs. Old friends across shuttered trading desks asked him daily for miracles he could not give. Maybe this alien lattice was the miracle. A knock rattled the apartment door, breaking his trance. 3 sharp raps, measured, then silence. Nathan killed the lamp and stood. Only 2 people knew his building, and 1 had been arrested at noon. He slid a drawer open, fingers brushing a ceramic-handled chef's knife, an absurd weapon against modern pistols, yet somehow comforting. He approached the peephole. "Mr. Bishop?" The voice outside was female, low, calm, carrying the faint rasp of shared exhaustion. "I come from Richmond House. We have a mutual friend at Greylock." Greylock, codename for Harmony Collins, once PayPal's brightest encryption architect, now rumored to run a clandestine mesh hub under the ruins of Grand Central. If Greylock sent someone, they already knew about Index Omega. That meant speed mattered more than fear. Nathan unbolted the door. The hallway smelled of stale disinfectant and candle smoke. The visitor wore a waxed canvas jacket speckled with ash and a messenger bag stitched from Tesla seat leather. Her hair was braided tight against her scalp, a faint scar ran from earlobe to collarbone. She lifted a gloved hand in greeting. "My name's Zoe Tremblay," she said. Ex-BlackRock, ex-Bank of Canada, currently refugee analyst for whoever still pays in calories. Your relay pinged us with something impossible. We need to talk before the Bureau triangulates your signal. The world tilted. Nathan blinked, then stepped aside. "Inside," he said. Zoe entered, surveying the cramped studio. Her gaze lingered on the dark window, the glowing monitor, the half-empty Hennessy. "Spirits for courage," she murmured. "Price has gone up." "I keep it for remembering the old volatility," Nathan replied, sealing the door. "You mentioned triangulation. How bad?" "Bad enough." She placed a battered satellite phone on the table. "The Bureau lit up the Upper Bay 2 hours ago. They're ghost pinging every node west of Broadway. Either you push your payload now or they push you out a window." Nathan exhaled through his teeth. "Then we push." Zoe produced a sleek portable drive, smaller than a cigarette lighter. "Seed crystal," she explained. "Air-gapped, one time right. Harmony said you'd need it." He took the drive gently, as though it were an embryo. "I'll mirror the lattice," he said, seating himself at the terminal. "But once it propagates, we need distribution nodes outside the siege wall. Canada's locked tight. Borders locked to governments," she corrected. "Not to curiosity." From her bag, she unrolled a blueprint of the disused North River tunnels beneath the Hudson, marked with smuggler icons. "Steel and mud. We ride under the blockade, patch into Montreal's darknet, and let Index Omega reproduce inside every cold wallet from here to Vancouver." A concussive boom rolled through the street. The window glass shuddered. Sirens wailed, strangled mid-note as power grids popped like fuses. The apartment lights guttered, then died. Nathan's monitor went black. He could hear the city breathing in the dark, an ocean of frightened lungs. "EMP drones," Zoe said. "They're blinding the district." But Nathan's laptop chimed back to life, powered by a solar-charged battery bank he had soldered together from scrapped e-bikes. Lines of green code streamed across the screen, Index Omega compiling under his fingers. "The lattice is blind-resistant," he whispered, awed. "It routes around light." Searchlights stabbed through the smoked glass, white spears pinning them to the wall. Outside, armored trucks clattered. Nathan recognized the drone of retrofitted Mercedes G-Wagons, the Bureau's signature convoy. He typed, keystrokes rattling like machine gun fire, until the terminal barked "seed complete." He slammed the portable drive into its port, wrote the lattice, ejected, and pushed it into Zoe's palm. "Go," he said. She didn't argue. She checked a compact scanner, nodded once, then headed for the fire escape. Nathan followed, grabbing the bottle of Hennessy on instinct. Rotorwash shredded the night air as drones swept rooftops. Down the ladder they slid while bullets clanged off iron rungs. On the pavement, a battered BMW coupe fishtailed to a halt. A teenager leaned across the seat waving them in, Omega spray painted on the door. Nathan dove across crumpled upholstery, Zoe slammed the door, and the BMW rocketed down the alley. Behind them, the Bureau's Mercedes overshot the turn and plowed into rusted dumpsters. Sirens dwindled. Ahead, the Lincoln Tunnel loomed, its entrance sealed by concrete barriers hastily stenciled closed. Nathan took a shaking swig of Hennessy, then passed it to Zoe. "For volatility," he said. She drank, wiped her mouth, grinned. "For liquidity." The BMW leapt the median and vanished into the dark throat of the tunnel. In that instant, Nathan saw, as numbers instead of images, a future where mothers no longer traded Hermes scarves for bread, where factories roared alive in forgotten states, where a lattice of trust rewrote despair. Perhaps impossible, but numbers, whispered correctly, could move mountains. He opened his eyes as the taillights slipped beneath the river and the city behind them burned neon on fumes. The BMW's tires howled as they cleared the last safety curb and dropped into darkness. Dust-choked air rushed past the windows. Stripped copper cables dangled from the tunnel ceiling like jungle vines. The coupe's makeshift LED bars flicked on, carving pale tunnels of light ahead. Nathan forced his breathing to match the thrum of the engine, while Zoe keyed rapid commands into her satellite phone. Pinging a constellation of mesh repeaters, she claimed still lived somewhere under the St. Lawrence skyline. Their driver introduced himself only once traffic noise drowned the sirens. Diego Martinez, courier for the Rail Saints. He looked too young to shave, yet his hands never wavered on the wheel. A grease-smudged index card taped to the dash read, "If you can read this, we're still alive." The tunnel felt endless, a ribbed esophagus designed for ghosts. Sections of track had been ripped up for black market scrap. Elsewhere, jagged rails still protruded, ready to gut a careless tire. Diego steered around each obstacle with hairbreadth margins, the BMW fishtailing over ballast, brake rotors screaming. Twice they passed graffiti tags glowing in fresh day-glow paint. Omega spirals and arrowheads, proof that other smugglers had threaded this needle mere hours before. Zoe kept her voice low. Rail Saints maintain a chain of caches every 10 clicks. Food, batteries, emergency medkits. If the Bureau ever torches one, the next crews double-stock the void. Mutual insurance, Nathan muttered. Index Omega on rails. She flashed a quick grin. Exactly. The lattice you compiled? Rail Saints will seed it into every cache tablet before dawn. A tremor rattled the chassis. Loose concrete rained from overhead. Far behind them a boom echoed. Hydraulic breaching charges sealing the entrance they just used. Diego's knuckles whitened. They're collapsing the mouth behind us. Means they know you're worth it. Worth trouble, Zoe corrected. The tunnel emerged into the forgotten expanse of Penn Station's underbelly. Acres of cracked ballast lit by a single emergency beacon that cast the world in submarine red. There, tucked beneath half-crumbled platforms, squatted an ungainly contraption. 3 rusted maintenance carts welded into a makeshift rail speeder, power-packed with scavenged Tesla battery bricks and steered by a yoke cut from an old Cessna. A morphing glow pulsed under its cowling, the blue-white heartbeat of lithium cells that had once dreamed of autopilot highways. Diego slid to a stop beside it. An older man in a faded NYFD jacket limped forward, shotgun cradled in one arm. His other hand held a barcode scanner. Identify. Zoe popped her door and raised both palms. Cargo, Bishop plus Seed. Clearance, Greylock 3. The scanner chirped when it passed over the drive pouch. The firefighter nodded once, then barked at Diego. BMW gets stripped for parts. Battery modules first. Make her a ghost. Diego saluted. She already is. He climbed out and began disconnecting leads. Nathan hesitated beside the speeder. Top speed. 50 on straight rail, the firefighter said. Enough to outrun drones in these tubes. Name's Keating, by the way. Rail Saints Station Chief, Section Delta. They boarded the rattling craft. Zoe took navigator's seat, Keating the throttle. Nathan crouched amid crates labeled lactate ringer and synthetic diesel. Beside him lay a crate of perfume bottle-sized vials, indelible crypto seeds suspended in amber resin, each stamped with the Omega sigil like a secret sacrament. Keating gunned the motor. The speeder lurched forward, showering sparks. Behind them, automated cutting torches whined as Diego disemboweled the BMW. In the tunnel's gloom, the coupe's kidney grills looked like the grin of some half-gutted beast. They plunged north under the Palisades. Time dissolved into a sequence of lurches and course corrections. Nathan felt each jolt as a punctuation mark in the story he'd somehow begun writing with other people's lives. He wanted to ask how Zoe had found him so quickly, how Harmony hid beneath Grand Central, why teenage couriers and limping firefighters chose to gamble everything on a lattice of code he'd glimpsed for less than an hour. But the noise of steel wheels on warped track drowned introspection. They reached the old Amtrak service spur near Secaucus when the first drone found them. A phosphorescent eye flared in an overhead ventilation shaft. Moments later, a streak of tracer rounds hammered the tunnel wall, ricochets screaming off ceramic ballast. Keating slammed the throttle lever forward. Electric motors shrieked. The speeder surged. Raptors, Zoe shouted. Chinese export models, thermal seekers. Move! Nathan grabbed the rail cart side rail as centrifugal force tried to pitch him onto the track. Ahead loomed a switch, one branch continuing toward Newark, the other angling beneath industrial yards toward the defunct Lackawanna cutoff. Zoe yanked an iron lever leaning against the bulkhead and the switch rail clanged over just in time. The speeder veered onto the side spur, Behind them, tracer rounds stitched sparks across the main line. The drone attempted to follow but clipped a girder and exploded in a hail of shrapnel. Nathan ducked instinctively. One fragment sliced through a crate of medical fluids, spraying cold saline over his jacket. Heating cursed. That was the cheap Scout. The expensive ones won't miss. Zoe looked back at Nathan. Even in the gloom, her eyes burned with purpose. You still believe in your lattice? He swallowed. I believe the old math died the day tariffs hit. We need new math. Then get ready to sell this gospel, she said, voice almost tender. Montreal isn't the finish line. It's the printing press. They crossed state lines unseen. Somewhere overhead, New Jersey's ruin bled into New York's neglected backwoods. And then, after a tunnel carved like a mineshaft through the Ramapo Ridge, they emerged into the Adirondack Underground, where rails hadn't seen revenue traffic since before the pandemic. Here the air tasted colder, cleaner, yet strangely metallic. Centuries-old seepage of ferrobacteria painting walls orange-red. At a siding marked only by a kerosene lantern, rail saints from the northern sectors waited with hot broth and power tools. Nathan stretched aching legs while Zoe briefed a red-bearded woman in a fur bomber hat. By the time he joined them, the discussion had shifted from route logistics to philosophical stakes. Redbeard Magda Wasilewski, by way of Polish-Canadian long-haul trucking, patted the seed pouch. My cousins in Alston smuggled dissident pamphlets during '81. Paper saved them because radios were jammed. You think these resin chips can do the same? They can do more, Zoe said. They can resurrect exchange itself. Bread for bread. Not bread for 600% inflated paper. Magda snorted. I'll believe it when I taste unsubsidized coffee again. Hold on, Nathan interjected, suddenly remembering the last commodity chart he'd seen before the blackout. Coffee futures collapsed when Brazil embargoed roast exports. If Index Omega calculates regional arbitrage in real time, we enlist co-ops that still hoard green beans. Barter perishes from asymmetrical information, not from distance. Magda raised an eyebrow. You're the architect? Midwife, he corrected. The architect is anonymous, and possibly sitting in a prison somewhere beyond the firewall. She studied him, then extended a flask. Zubrowka, warms faster than Hennessy. He took a small swig, feeling the snap of bison grass cut through tunnel chill. Somewhere in the distance, another explosion reverberated. A muffled boom swallowed by miles of granite. Bureau demolition teams were sealing alternates. The hourglass inverted. Rail saints fitted the speeder with fresh battery bricks and welded makeshift armor plates over the cargo deck. At dawn, pink light seeped through ventilation grates above, illuminating motes of iron dust floating like alien snow. Nathan realized he hadn't seen sunrise in days. Keating, who had slept 10 minutes against a bulkhead, limped over. Next stretch is the killer, he rasped. Dak Passage. No side tunnels, no safe sidings, 7 miles dead straight. If raptors come back, all we can do is gun it and pray. Zoe slapped a new drone jamming array atop the roof, an ugly motherboard bristling with scavenged Tesla antennas. We'll fry guidance within 50 meters. After that, it's line of sight small arms. Small arms, Nathan echoed. Magda dropped a weather-pitted Pelican case at his feet. Inside lay 2 bullpup rifles and a brick of 30-round mags. Welcome to logistics, she said. Nathan had fired exactly 3 bullets in his life, all at a corporate retreat range. He closed the case but kept his palm on the lid. Like someone accepting a pet he didn't know how to feed. They launched. Dak Passage lived up to its legend. A geological knife wound running aerostraight beneath heavily surveilled countryside. The speeder topped 60 as battery packs bled amperage. Sparks trailed from iron wheels. Within minutes, warning sirens howled behind them, echoing down the cylindrical throat. Raptors vectoring on heat signatures swooped through hatch vents, their rotors screeching. The jamming array pulsed. The first drone's camera popped in a shower of circuitry, veering into a wall and detonating. The second adapted, switching to passive optical tracking. It dove low, spitting tungsten flechettes that punched holes through steel plating. Nathan found himself crouched beside Magda, rifle braced on a cargo crate. She barked instructions. Lead by a meter, squeeze, don't slap. He inhaled, exhaled, and squeezed. The rifle bucked. Tracer pocked the drone's starboard rotor. Magda's shot followed a heartbeat later, shredding its battery. Flames blossomed. Shrapnel rattled the speeder, but the engine kept howling. Ahead, daylight glimmered. A service aperture hacked open years ago by copper thieves. Keating pushed the throttle past the red line. Motors wailed like tortured sirens. They burst from the tunnel into blinding cold sunshine beside a frozen lake ringed by pine and silent clapboard cabins. It felt obscene after so much subterranean gloom. The speeder coasted onto an abandoned logging spur buried in snowdrifts. Rail saints from the Canadian cell awaited with snow camo parkas, diesel sleds, and a battered Starlink dish pointed west like a radar gun aimed at destiny. Nathan's pulse thundered. The fight in the passage had lasted less than 90 seconds. Yet every digit in his body shook as though wired to the national grid. Zoe checked him for shrapnel, then pressed the seed pouch into his hand. "Your turn," she said. "Sat uplinks clean for 40 minutes. Show them a miracle." The cabin that served as their uplink station smelled of pine pitch and burnt silicon. Retired miners hunched over laptops running stripped-down Debian distros. Nathan plugged the seed crystal into a hardened port. Index Omega blossomed across monitors as fractal animations of liquidity webs. Command windows spat strings of addresses generating themselves, each envelope sealed by lattice consensus in under a millisecond. One by one, nodal pings answered from Quebec City, from Saskatoon, from outposts Nathan had never heard of: Inuvik, Goose Bay, Whitehorse. Each handshake birthed more, seeding outward like dandelion fluff on wind. The resin vials Magda unpacked were scanned, hashed, recorded, ready to ride sled convoys east and west. Some would cross the Arctic by airship, others sail under fake manifests aboard Icelandic cod trawlers. Within an hour, 82 nodes formed the initial ring. Gasoline, insulin, fresh produce, even rare luxuries like Colombian coffee began to list themselves in barter queues faster than bureau algorithms could hope to blacklist. Nathan watched the map light up and felt tears sting his eyes. Not just relief, but vindication for every spreadsheet he'd ever bent toward humane ends. Behind him, rail saints cheered in hushed voices. Someone produced a flask of maple whiskey. Another handed Zoe a steaming mug of chicory brew disguised as coffee. Then the SatLink console flashed high priority incoming. A new hash appeared, pre-approved by the Lattice, tagged with the legend, Greylock Prism Key, Harmony Collins herself. When Nathan opened the encrypted payload, a single sentence scrolled across the screen. Bishop, Bureau moving on Grand Central. Need Eclipse Protocol. Hope Montreal likes revolution. Attached was a packet of code far denser and far more dangerous than the Lattice seed. Eclipse Protocol. A kill switch that could wipe the dollar's remaining digital scaffolding clean if executed on New York's core banking routers. Zoe read over his shoulder. If we run that, we force parity, dollar or Lattice, choose your faith. Magda frowned. Parities cause revolutions. Good ones or bad, depends who bleeds. Keating limped in, shotgun still smoking frost. Bishop, you willing to hit execute and watch Manhattan starve faster? Nathan stared at the screen. He saw lunchtime crowds that now bartered luxury scarves for stale bread. He saw boardrooms that still stocked Hennessy in crystal decanters for executives drafting layoff memos. He saw the improbable convoy that had carried him here, stitched together by ordinary people risking bullets to move trust across borders the old world declared forbidden. The Lattice needed vacuum to grow, but too much vacuum and nothing living could breathe. He inhaled the pine smoke cabin air, tasted bison grass vodka lingering on his tongue, and realized the decision was no longer theoretical. Outside, rails groaned as new loads were secured. In the distance, diesel sleds snarled awake like metallic wolves. Inside, every eye turned to him. Nathan reached for the keyboard. Nathan's fingers hovered above the keys as if the plastic could burn. Execute Eclipse? The cursor blinked like a silent metronome, marking heartbeats rather than seconds. Around him the cabin hummed. A dozen laptops crunching Lattice updates, the sibilant hiss of sled exhaust drifting through cracked logs. Keating's shotgun clicking as he thumbed shells into the tube. Zoe leaned close, voice low enough that only he could hear. "Parity isn't the same as annihilation," she murmured. "If the dollar grid collapses, the bureau's eye collapses with it. But hospitals, shelters, pensions, they're gone already," Keating rasped from the doorway. "Government just hasn't sent the memo." Magda reached across a crate of resin vials and set a brass pocket watch between them. 5 minutes till the next low-orbit sweep. After that, Harmony can't guarantee a clean channel. Decide, Bishop. She snapped the watch shut and retreated, boots crunching in snow. Nathan remembered reading about supermassive stars. When their fusion flame consumed every element up to iron, collapse happened in the silence between heartbeats, gravity outracing light. One moment a star, the next a hole where laws changed names. Eclipse Protocol was exactly that, collapsing the iron core of an old economy to birth a heavier one. He wasn't sure if Index Omega was bright enough to be the new sun, but he'd already set the fuse simply by surviving this far. He typed 2 words, "Stand by," then a semicolon, "Commit but do not execute." A heartbeat later, he set a lock command keyed to his biometrics and Zoe's combined. Eclipse would require both of them. No single hand could push humanity across the event horizon. Zoe watched the code confirm. Relief flickered behind her eyes. Relief, but not release. "Dual trigger," she said. "Good. Now let's make sure we live long enough to decide." Rail Saints convoyed them upriver on diesel sleds that skimmed frozen tributaries like black-winged insects. The Canadian dawn unrolled in violent colors. Violet where sky kissed snow, gold where ice cracked to reveal black water. Broadcast towers along the St. Lawrence looked skeletal, their cables rimed with hoarfrost. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Montreal pulsed, half of it lit by smuggled Chinese generators, the other half dark and hungry. Yet whispers painted the city as New Alexandria, refugees trading blueprints for hydroponic towers, ex-chefs swapping AI recipes that stretched lentils into feasts, hackers minting Index Omega shards on jury-rigged quantum boxes stolen from shuttered universities. Nathan sat behind the sled driver, cradling a thermos of instant coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. He watched Zoe at the head of the convoy, parka hood snapping in the slipstream, satellite phone to her ear. The Rail Saints rode with rifles slung and eyes narrowed against wind. Modern pony express carrying not mail but metabolic lifelines coded in math. At a riverside ghost town called Point O'Chain, they refueled under the rusted marquee of a gas station once painted bright red. The pumps had been gutted. In their place squat plastic tanks brimming with ethanol distilled from Quebec corn. Nathan stretched, muscles wailing after hours gripping rail benches. Keating hobbled over, shotgun across his back. Montreal's not safe ground, the firefighter warned between coughs. Bureau proxies already inside. New York's paying smugglers triple to feed them intel. Nathan poured a splash of Hennessy into the coffee, a sacrament against cold. They'll find us anywhere the internet still breathes. Maybe. Keating's gray eyes softened. But choose your battlefield. Cities broadcast desperation. Out here, noise is our armor. Magda joined them, tapping a tablet that projected a holographic mesh of node growth. 82 became 130 overnight. Most are Canadians, but we just got a ping from Duluth. Somebody in Minnesota tunneled through the blackout. Show me. Nathan leaned closer. The node's ID resolved to Iron Lake _Forge. A metadata flag indicated the operator traded mechanical parts, ball bearings, servo gears, salvaged from mothballed caterpillar plants. An American heart still beating inside the embargo. Zoe approached, phone tucked away. Iron Lake says they have 2,000 pounds of grade 6 steel bearings. In exchange, they want freeze-dried produce and antibiotics. That's a big ask for early network trust, Magda said. It's a statement, Nathan countered. They're betting the lattice works. We match them, or we betray first adopters. Keating exhaled white steam. We can spare antibiotics from northern caches, but freeze-dried? Closest stock is Bay St. Paul. Then reroute a sled. Zoe's tone brokered no debate. Magda raised a brow. You authorize transfers now? Zoe looked to Nathan. He nodded. In that moment, command shifted without ceremony. Two quants with ink still drying on their exile papers now dictated supply routes that might determine whether small towns starved. Magda snapped a salute. "As you wish, Bishop and Tremblay. Welcome to Rail Governance." She stalked off to rewrite manifests. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he held. Zoe offered half a protein bar. "First lesson of informal power grids," she said, chewing. "Never wield authority you're unwilling to defend yourself." "Defense is math," he answered. "Math needs bodies to move." They shared a grin that felt like borrowed sunshine. By evening, Montreal's skyline emerged. A jagged silhouette where office towers blinked erratic LED constellations powered by diesel stacks on rooftops. Refugee shanties clung to freeway ramps. Vapor from barrel stoves curled like prayers. Convoy escorts switched headlamps to anger red in case bureau snipers watched from half-finished condominiums. Every bridge across the St. Lawrence flew improvised flags. Fleur-de-lis stitched beside forbidding Omega symbols. Maple leaves spray-painted with Bitcoin glyphs. Rail saints diverted into a warren of concrete loading docks beneath what once had been a mall. Inside, the smell of chili, solvents, and generator exhaust mingled. Thousands of faces populated the shadows. Somali dockhands stripping copper wire. Filipino nurses ladling soup. Inuit mechanics cleaning solar panels the size of trampolines. Zoe announced their arrival in fluent French. Cheers rolled back like surf. Nathan followed her onto a wooden pallet stage hastily swept of sawdust. Harmony Collins limped forward from the crowd. Brown hair threaded with silver, one arm in a sling, eyes blazing ferocity. She'd escaped Grand Central's bust by riding a maintenance elevator shaft, broke her collarbone in the fall, then hitchhiked north in a cargo compartment of a Mercedes tour bus repurposed for refugees. When she saw Nathan, she grinned like a revenant. "Thought you'd still be calculating risk," she said. He embraced her gently, mindful of injuries. "Risk is obsolete." Harmony turned toward the murmuring hall. "Show them." Nathan pulled the Starlink tablet from his bag. The lattice map pulsed. 753 active nodes spanning 2 nations. Transaction layers scrolled grain for insulin, solar arrays for seed potatoes, even a single Mercedes battery pack priced against 3 bottles of aged Hennessy and a case of N95 masks. Applause erupted not with thunder but with steady, rhythmic clapping, the sound of desperate people daring to believe. Yet victory tasted of copper. A scout burst in, coat streaked with sleet. Bureau columns sighted on Autoroute 15, armored SUVs, drone escorts, ETA 30 minutes. Chaos bloomed. Children herded toward basement tunnels. Stevedores grabbed rifles. Harmony shouted new assignments. Zoe caught Nathan's sleeve. They traced convoy signatures. "Your seed is on their kill list." "Then we move the key." Nathan pointed at a service lift. "Eclipse trigger sits on a split. If the Bureau takes us, they get only half." Keating, arm in a sling now too, joined them. Exit routes collapsing hourly. Old sewer mains feed toward the Olympic Stadium. Rail saints hold them, but tunnels flood in heavy rain. "I heard forecast calls for sleet," Harmony muttered, wincing as she adjusted her sling. "We'll manage." Magda lined crates of resin seeds near a cargo dolly. "We can't evacuate inventory, but we can replicate." She produced a laser engraver the size of a shoebox, already humming. "Print hashes on stainless tags, scatter them like dandelions." The engraver hissed scarlet sparks onto metal strips, each tag receiving a cryptographic mnemonic of private keys linked to cold wallets. Dozens per minute. Volunteers threaded them onto cords, tossing handfuls into the exodus flow. Children wore them like dog tags. Elders stuffed them into coat linings. A diaspora encoded in steel. Nathan shouldered a duffel of fresh printed tags. Zoe grabbed 2 more. Together with Harmony and Keating, they dove into a service corridor lit by a single emergency lamp. Behind them, engine grumbles deepened, Bureau G-wagons crunching ice. Sewers beneath Montreal formed a labyrinth older than most of its cathedrals. Ongoing snowmelt transformed concrete passages into ankle-deep rivers. Flashlights carved trembling cones through rank air. Somewhere above, Automatic fire rattled like hailstones on sheet metal. The group pressed on until Zoe halted at an intersection faintly illuminated by skylights set into the street above. She consulted a hand-drawn map scrawled over a 1990 tourist brochure. "This shaft leads to the Picgene rail cut," she whispered. "Half-mile crawl, then ladder up into Park Maisonneuve. From there, scatter." Keating coughed blood flecks into his glove. "I'll hold the intersection." "Harmon, not up for arguments," she snapped, bracing shotgun against wall. Nathan stepped forward. "We don't leave people behind for symbolism." Zoe fixed him with a stare. "We leave them behind to buy minutes for network replication. Keating's choice, not yours." The firefighter grinned crooked. "Never thought finance kids would outrank my fire chiefs." "Go." They clasped forearms, ritual of equal weight. Then Zoe ushered Nathan and Harmony into the crawl space, a concrete throat narrowing enough to force elbow shuffles. They dragged duffels behind, steel tags clinking like wind chimes. Each scrape of fabric echoed eternity. Halfway through, thunder boomed behind them. The tunnel shook, dust cascaded. Harmony whispered a curse. "They used thermobarics. Aren't those banned?" Nathan croaked. "Tariffs shredded treaties with them." Her voice cracked, but she kept crawling. Minutes stretched into trauma. At last, Zoe's flashlight struck metal rungs. They ascended one by one into moon-silvered snow. Park Maisonneuve lay silent except for distant sirens and the soft roar of wind through naked branches. A Ferris wheel dark against skyline looked like a shattered halo. They split without farewell, Harmony south toward the river, Zoe east across footbridges, Nathan north until lungs burned. He ducked into an abandoned subway kiosk, barricading the glass door with a toppled vending machine. Inside, flickering emergency strips cast jaundiced light. He unzipped the duffel. Steel tags glimmered like scaled fish. His hand trembled as he thumbed open a pocket notebook and began writing duplicates of recovery phrases. Redundancy for redundancy, neurotic but necessary. Static crackled over a wall-mounted emergency radio. A bureau newsreader proclaimed Operation Monetary Mercy underway, claiming terrorist financiers had detonated explosives in Montreal, threatening national stability. Nathan barked a laugh so bitter it hurt ribs. From a coat pocket, he pulled the Starlink tablet, miraculously still intact. Node map showed scattershot pings where Montreal relays spooled into fallback mode. Red icons marked dead lines. Green flickered where tags had already been scanned by refugees with burner phones. Growth slowed but hadn't reversed. Battery at 10%. A shadow passed outside, tall, coat hood up. Nathan froze, hand inching toward the bullpup rifle lying atop candy bar wrappers. The figure knocked softly. "Bishop," whispered Zoe's voice. "It's me." He dragged the vending machine aside. She slipped in, breath pluming. "Keating?" he asked. She shook her head once. Grief like fissures in ice crossed her face, but she steadied. Intersection held. Long enough. They crouched behind the kiosk desk, sharing the remaining battery warmth of the tablet. Harmony's biometric ping lit up momentarily from some unknown quarter of the city, then vanished under interference. Nathan's chest tightened. "Eclipse remains dormant," he said. Zoe took his hand, pressing her thumb to the tablet's sensor beside his print. The system accepted dual authentication, flagged protocols as armed/locked. "Not tonight," she whispered, "but someday air will run out. We decide then." Outside snow began again, lazy flakes drifting beneath street lamps. In that hush, they opened the Hennessy flask, each sipping small. The liquid burned life back into numb cheeks. Across the city, armored convoys combed streets where children now carried stainless keys to a new universe and traders swapped steel bearings for insulin, while bureaucrats still drafted memos in currencies no longer trusted. Nathan closed his eyes. He pictured an event horizon, a place light could not escape, then pictured math strong enough to unspool light into possibility. Somewhere above the storms of tariffs and blockades, stars still fused elements, indifferent but illuminating. Index Omega felt like borrowed starlight. Maybe that was enough. A distant explosion lit the skyline orange, but the snow kept falling, indifferent, covering both wounds and seeds. The week after the Montreal breakout tasted of iron filings and diesel. Every new sunrise arrived with the metallic shriek of bureau drones strafing empty streets. Yet each sunset found the lattice fatter, its green pulses crowding the Starlink maps like moss on stone. Nathan and Zoe slept in 30-minute increments inside an abandoned metro maintenance depot, blankets smelling of axle grease, while Harmony's voice drifted through shortwave like a revenant, sometimes from silo basements in the Laurentians, sometimes from a hydro dam near Trois-Rivières. She had lost her sling, gained a limp, and now called herself Courier Zero, laughing that aliases were cheaper than armor. Montreal's civilian mayor publicly begged Ottawa for troops. Ottawa demurred, citing jurisdictional complexity. In practice, the city split down Boulevard René Lévesque, North Side Lattice Territory, South Side Bureau Enclave wrapped in razor wire. Markets reflected the fault line. On Lattice streets, a Hermes scarf bought 3 days of fresh produce. On Bureau streets, the same scarf fetched nothing without a government stamp guaranteeing authenticity and compliance. People crossed every night, trading breath for bread. Each morning, the exploding delta inflation of federal cash hollowed out a little more compliance. Nathan stared at those charts by the light of a battery lantern and felt the eclipse key beating in his duffel like a swallowed clock. The dollar grid had not collapsed. It merely rotted, propped by executive decrees that forced merchants to accept printed paper at gunpoint. But rumors coming over the border said whole counties in Michigan now refuse Treasury scrip entirely, pricing groceries only in grain, generator hours, or index omega credits minted on bootleg PayPal servers that had escaped the early seizures. One whisper claimed Tesla engineers outside Austin had rebooted their line on Lattice escrow, paying suppliers in battery pack futures instead of dollars. Another said a string of Carolina hospitals bartered dialysis fluid for shipments of diverted Louis Vuitton overstock, branding them survival chutes on the black market. The Lattice needed breathing room. The Bureau needed a reason to blink. Eclipse Protocol promised both, but only if triggered at the right node, the right millisecond, with the right narrative ready to fill the vacuum. Otherwise, it was a neutron bomb set to detonate inside every pensioner's checking account. Zoe read the same data, jaw clenched tight enough to crack enamel. We have maybe 2 weeks before Washington pushes Marshall Currency Act 2, makes dollar non-convertible, punishes alt ledgers with 10-year prison terms. After that, Lattice will be labeled economic sabotage by definition. Nathan closed his eyes. We're already saboteurs. Question is whether we graduate to architects. The decision crystallized when Harmony finally appeared in the flesh, stepping from a refrigerated-produced van smelling of wilted spinach and Spanglish curse words. Snow caked her boots, and her coat sleeve was tied off where a bullet had sliced through the fabric. Yet her grin irradiated the platform. 1,206,891, she announced in lieu of greeting. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Nodes? Confirmed this morning. USA accounts now outnumber Canadian 2-1. Rust Belt towns mostly. They're ready to flip the switch. Nathan felt his pulse accelerate. Population centers? Cleveland, Buffalo, Detroit, Harmony said, ticking off names on bandaged fingers. Detroit is critical auto supply chain. And guess what else? Treasury wants to seize the D-Town fiber hub tomorrow at 0500. If they succeed, Lattice traffic east of the Mississippi slows to dial-up. Zoe unrolled a rail map, tracing a finger. Detroit is also where PayPal's redundant mainframe cluster sits, buried under Fort Street. Nathan, we connect Eclipse there, hardline into the Federal Automated Clearinghouse router, and we define the conversion path ourselves. Define, Nathan repeated, as in implement parity ratios before the Bureau can torch reserves. Harmony nodded. Eclipse doesn't have to be a kill switch. We can mutate it into a mercy fork, wipe institutional balances above a sane threshold, roll everything under $10,000 into Lattice credits 1-for-1. Small businesses survive. Oligarch coffers vaporize. Treasury can scream, but the map resets. Zoe exhaled a ghost of condensation. Revolution by algorithm. Nathan stared at the cold floor until cipher fractals danced in his peripheral vision. We'll need ground access in Detroit, real-time satellite uplink, and enough broadcast power to propagate the fork before counter-intrusion. DHS will deploy jammers, maybe kinetic. Harmony's grin widened. That's why I borrowed an icebreaker. 3 days later, they sailed down the St. Lawrence on the MV Nordic Angel, a decommissioned Great Lakes cargo hauler retrofitted with Chinese solar sails and a Tesla-derived battery spine as long as 3 city buses. Snow stung like birdshot. Volunteer sailors wore thrift store BMW racing jackets under orange life vests, swapping stories about family barbecues now fueled by hardwood scavenged from once manicured suburban decks. Below decks, Harmony and Nathan slaved over hardened laptops inside a makeshift Faraday cage built from Mercedes door panels welded into a coffin-shaped box. Zoe spent most of the voyage topside, calibrating Starlink antennae to dodge geofence blacklists. At midnight, she would descend carrying contraband bottles of Hennessy, rationed in steel shot glasses to keep frostbite at bay. Radio chatter painted a continent cracking open. Dallas supermarkets accepting only barter. Seattle coffee roasters trading sacks of beans for rooftop solar panels. Florida retirees lining highways with for sale signs scrawled on the backs of designer handbags. Trump appeared nightly on Patriot Vision, promising an international restitution accord just as soon as Canada and Mexico remembered their place. Each speech pushed Treasury bonds lower, hyperinflation higher. And yet, deep in supply chain veins, lattice nodes cloned like stem cells. They anchored off Windsor under a moon like a chipped silver coin. Diesel sled convoys carried them over the frozen river in silence, headlights taped to slits. In Detroit proper, factories stood like steel titans frozen mid-stride. Street murals lampooned tariffs with grotesque caricatures of cargo ships strangled by red tape. Yet life pulsed. Alley bazaars trading fresh-printed stainless wallets. Warehouse greenhouses glowing purple under LED rigs powered by jury-rigged PayPal nodes. The Fort Street bunker lay 10 stories underground beneath what had once been a sleek fintech office. Now its revolving doors were barricaded with transmission housings from abandoned Mercedes buses. Inside, ex-PayPal engineers armed with bullpup carbines guided them through dim corridors faintly perfumed by expired Louis Vuitton hand sanitizer repurposed as disinfectant. Nathan recognized old colleagues by voice, not by face. They all wore welding goggles to foil biometric cams. The mainframe cathedral felt simultaneously ancient and newborn. Rows of rack towers humming with patched-together GPUs stolen from crypto farms. Harmony booted Eclipse stub on a quarantined blade. Zoe launched the Mercy Fork routine, code that looked like a wolf wearing monk's robes, savage math cloaked in ethical checksums. Nathan initiated handshake with the Federal Clearinghouse backbone. Latency spiked as bureau firewalls bristled, scanning. For minutes, Zoe muttered. After that, they'll slice the fiber with shaped charges. Harmony activated Starlink redundancy, beams piggybacking through Canadian ground stations. Static roared as weather sheared bandwidth. Nathan typed final parameters. Cap accounts above 7-figure thresholds at survival ratio 0.1. Convert sub 10,000 balances 95% payable in Lattice. 5% in transitional credits redeemable for essential imports once borders reopened. He glanced at Zoe. She placed her thumbprint beside his. Dual trigger armed. Outside, explosions thundered. Bureau drones carpet bombing West Fort Street Bridge to sever access. Engineers locked blast doors. Over intercom, a voice shouted that armored Mercedes SUVs breached level 2 parking. Gunfire echoed through ventilation shafts. Harmony's face remained stone as she started secure compile. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Compile finished. Execute. Y/N blinked on screens. On your mark, Zoe said, palate tasting of copper. Nathan felt history tighten around his lungs. He pressed Y. Sirens died mid-howl. Screens flooded with scrolling conversion logs. New York Fed, Chicago Fed, Dallas Federal. Each institution pinged. Attempted rejection, failed cryptographic verification, logged new ledger addresses. $M2 aggregates dropped in real-time graphs, plummeting like elevator cables. Outside, gunfire crescendoed, then ceased. A hush like snowfall filled the bunker. The federal backbone went dark. Treasury authentication servers spat checksum errors and expired certs. The dollar grid's iron core collapsed silently, gravitational debt imploding into itself. But small personal balances rematerialized inside Lattice wallets seconds later. Amanda J. In Boise, $782 converted. Lorenzo K. In Newark, $3,100. Sisters of Mercy Clinic in Baton Rouge, $9,890. Harmony exhaled a laugh that sounded half-sobbing. It's holding. Zoe set off a narrowband broadcast. All nodes confirm Mercy Fork. Q update Delta T plus 30 seconds. Replies cascaded in Cleveland, Duluth, Montreal, Austin, Portland, green across the board. A distant boom rocked dust from the ceiling. Backup generators flickered, but bureau command lines lost encryption, forced to fall back analog. Without centralized clearing, armored payroll cards became decorative plastic. Agents outside discovered their hazard bonuses vanished, clipped by their own currency's event horizon. Nathan stared at the lattice globe now glowing emerald, a million-node constellation. Tears blurred numbers. Zoe took his hand. Harmony slid to the floor, laughing at the absurdity of survival. 3 days later, markets reopened. Not the old New York Stock Exchange, but open-air plazas where people printed QR tags on battered inkjets and stapled them to crates of produce or spools of wiring. Oil stayed scarce, but ethanol moved where ethanol was needed. Coffee returned in modest trickles, trading 7 ounces for one sterilized fuel cell the size of a thumb. Mothers in Ohio ceased swapping Hermes scarves for bread because bread was priced in calories again. Not panic. A Detroit corner bar accepted payment in microshares of agricultural co-ops. Its neon sign bragged, Hennessy? Cold? 2 credits. Mercedes repair shops traded catalytic converters for refurbished Tesla Powerwalls. BMW body panels became favored collateral for builders resurrecting derelict neighborhoods. On the Canadian border, Prime Minister Patel stated the obvious. Blockade is irrelevant. Trade has already crossed it. Mexican cooperatives negotiated directly with Great Lakes grain syndicates, using lattice escrow and convoy insurance via rail saints. Beijing condemned the fork as economic terrorism, but Chinese coastal cities quietly opened dark web portals to exchange surplus solar panels for Midwestern soy. Trump appeared once more on Patriot Vision, visage pale, denouncing traitorous tech elites, even as scrolling bulletins reported Treasury resignations, Pentagon refusals to intervene, and his own legal counsel fleeing to Paraguay. The broadcast cut mid-sentence when the network's generator failed. Diesel withheld by suppliers now pricing fuel exclusively in lattice credits. Nathan watched that final flicker inside a reclaimed Detroit clinic where solar-heated air smelled faintly of disinfectant and optimism. Harmony leaned on a crutch beside a nurse trading Louis Vuitton belt buckles for antibiotic ampoules. Zoe stood at a battered window, snowlight on her features, sipping contraband coffee. He approached with 2 enamel mugs of Hennessy thinned by herbal tea liquid economy in microcosm. To parity, he said. Zoe touched mugs. To liquidity. Harmony raised her crutch like a scepter. To a world where math keeps its promises. Outside, city lights pulse steady, not neon excess, but practical arrays of LED strips powered by rooftop panels. A convoy of refurbished BMW sedans glided past, trunks stacked with seed grain bound for rooftop farms. Children skated on an ice rink cleared in the shadow of a dormant Tesla showroom, their laughter louder than sirens. The starless winter sky glimmered not with celestial fusion but with a million ground-based LEDs flowering like constellations turned upside down. Proof that even light could learn new routes once freed from old gravity. Nathan took another sip, warmth blooming in his chest, and felt eclipse recede into the background code. Dormant now, guardian rather than weapon. Index Omega thrummed in every phone, every barter slip, every stainless tag worn smooth by anxious fingers. Somewhere, Keating's name etched in rail tunnel concrete reminded the network what sacrifice cost. And somewhere beyond the blockade, global fleets reconsidered the profits of isolation, watching a new currency born from nothing but courage and cold mathematics. The story would outrun them all, carried by rails, rivers, satellites, and human breath. It wasn't over, change never is, but the future now contained a calculus no tariff could touch.